So this story comes from these clay tablets. In the beginning, there was nothing but watery chaos, and darkness covered all. The deep and boundless sea, who had a name, and his name was Apsu, and his mate was named Tiamat, and she was called the Formless and Fearsome. And they both ruled over the primeval abyss, that is, all of the water. And Apsu's water mingled with Tiamat's, and from their union came the first gods. And they were born, and these were the firstborn of the gods. But these young gods were noisy and restless, and they disturbed the peaceful sleep of Apsu. So Tiamat, the mother of all, was angered by their commotion, and in her fury she plotted to unleash her vengeance, and she destroyed the younger gods. There was another god who was wise and crafty, the god of wisdom. He heard of Tiamat's plan, and in order to protect the younger gods, he cast a spell on Apsu, putting him into a deeper slumber, never to awaken again. And this primeval god Apsu was subdued as a result. And so now Apsu was gone, and Tiamat was left, and she raged even more fiercely, her anger growing like a mighty storm. She summoned fierce monsters, the likes of which had never been seen before, and they rallied to her side. The younger gods were trembling in fear, searching for a champion to face the great dragon Tiamat. And their choice was a god named Marduk. Marduk? I think it's Marduk. And he was the god of Babylon, a god of power and wisdom. Marduk accepted their challenge, and he was confident in his abilities. Marduk armed himself with the winds and with the storms being his mighty weapons. He mounted his fearsome storm chariot, and he pulled by 4 divine horses. With a roar, he confronted Tiamat in a titanic battle that shook the heavens and the earth. And Marduk hurled his tempests, and Tiamat opened her mouth, and she was ready to devour Marduk. And in a crucial moment, Marduk unleashed an arrow that pierced her heart, and Tiamat was defeated. This sounds like science fiction, right? Or like Lord of the Rings or something like that. He then split her body in 2, creating the heavens and the earth below. Isn't that interesting? He was able to defeat Tiamat, and he created the heavens and the earth as a result. So in this new creation, Marduk brought order out of chaos. He separated the waters above from the waters below, and he created the heavens and the earth. He adorned the earth with mountains, valleys, and plains. Marduk placed the sun and the moon in the sky to govern day and night, and he marked the seasons and the years. He scattered stars all across the heavens, and he set them in their courses. Each one had a purpose and a name. And from the waters he created fish to swim and birds to soar. On the land he made creatures, both wild and tame. Finally, Marduk shaped humankind in his image, giving them dominion over all he had created. So, with Tiamat defeated and her chaos subdued, Marduk took his place as the chief god, and the other gods bowed before him. He ordered the universe with precision and care, and he established the laws of nature. Then, on the 7th day, Marduk rested, pleased with the world he had fashioned, and so the world was created, and the gods reigned supreme, and humanity then emerged to serve in harmony with the divine plan. That story is 5,000 years old. Isn't that cool? It was discovered, I'll talk about this in just a minute. It was discovered not long ago, like just 150 years ago, but it comes all the way from ancient Babylonian days, almost 5,000 years ago. So that's pretty cool. Just something to get us thinking, oh wait, there's another story of creation. So you guys can go with Joanne, and good luck, Joanne, answering their questions now. Let's go to the sermon section, Lynn, and I just want to briefly talk about how, I'm glad to hear we had some people, at least some of you, hopefully all of you, enjoyed the parables that we went through over the past couple months over the summer. But now we'll be going through the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, as it's called in Jewish circles. Go to the next slide there, Lynn. Oh, no, we'll skip the video for now. Just the one that says, yeah, that one. So in Jewish circles, they have the Hebrew Bible, and it's called the Tanakh, and it's actually an acronym. It means Torah for T for Torah, N for, in the Hebrew, prophets, and K for writings in Hebrew. So it's an acronym, and it all has all the same books that we have in what we call the Old Testament, but this is their Bible. And so I was thinking it would be wonderful to go through all of the stories that we know so well, like, for example, the creation story, and perhaps try to find new and fresh ways to think about these stories, or to see how they might we might relate to them differently than we had perhaps when we were growing up, or just hearing them as we have lived. So we're going to begin again today with the creation story, but we're going to go all through. So if you have a favorite story, like I know Joanne mentioned, don't forget to do Daniel and the Lion's Den. I know I want to do Jonah and the great fish, right? Or the book of Job. Or you tell me what your favorite stories from the Old Testament are, and I'll see if I can look into that and make it one of my sermons. And what we can do is we can do this for the next 2 or 3 months, and then we can culminate with Christmas time and look at the fulfillment of all of these stories and the whole narrative being Jesus and the birth of Jesus. So I thought that might be a good way to do our sermons for the rest of the year. But today we're looking at origins, in the beginning, right? Human beings have always pondered our origins. Where did we come from? Where did the universe come from, right? And so as we look at this chapter 1 of Genesis, which is the creation story that we have there, we're going to be discussing our origins. And the great thing that we're going to do today is we're going to find that no matter what you think about where the universe came from, there's always going to be a central theme. There's going to be something that we can hold on to as believers, and that is the fact that God is our creator, right? That's a truth that all Christians have always believed, that Jewish people have always believed, that God is our creator. But what exactly happened with the creation of the universe? Do you know what people today say about how the universe came to be? Who here knows what it's called? It's a theory. A theory meaning it's a way to understand the origin that will work in science, and it's called the Big Bang, right? I actually didn't really recognize and realize that the Big Bang theory is actually not that old. It's only about, 60 years old, mid 20th century, more or less. And of course, before the age of scientific inquiry over the past few hundred years, people just assumed that the book of Genesis and the creation story, that's how the universe came to be. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There it is. That's the origin of the universe. God spoke and the universe came to be. But of course, over the past few hundred years, people have tried to answer the question of where did the universe come from, or how did it get here? And they tried to answer it without appealing to the Bible, to try to understand it on purely scientific terms, and to try to say, well, let's look at the evidence of the universe as it is now and see if we can maybe extrapolate what happened long ago. And so what people did in the 20th century is they looked at the fact that the universe is expanding. And it's still expanding today. Everything is moving apart, right? And so it's surmised that, okay, well, if everything is expanding, at some point it must have been small. If everything is stretched out and big now, at some point it all had to, if it's expanding out, it had to have an origin point. And so they say 13 billion years ago, there was a small dot that contained every single piece of matter and energy that exists today in this tiny little dot. And there was some event that caused all of that matter and energy to expand. Now, the funny thing is it's called the Big Bang, and an explosion has this idea of things. If you think of an explosion, if this computer exploded, there would be all these parts that would go everywhere, right? Well, that's kind of right, but we have to understand that it's not stuff going everywhere. It's literally the makeup of the universe started small and went and stretched out. So maybe it's like the big stretching out is maybe a more accurate way to think of it, because it's starting this incredibly small state and going out further. And there's lots of other reasons why scientists believe that that's how the universe started. 13 billion years ago, it all started, and ever since then it's expanding, and eventually the universe will contract again, is what they say. So there's a beginning point to the universe, and there's an end point to the universe. Wow, that's how people over the past, again, like I said, over the past 67 years have understood the origin of the universe. Before that, there were other competing theories as to how the universe began. But again, before that, people didn't look at things in a scientific way. They didn't try to understand things in a rigid scientific observational sense. They didn't try to look at certain factors in the universe and then try to make conclusions. Instead, people would come up with stories that would involve gods that would help to explain how the universe came to be, or at least the current state of the universe. And this is why I read a very, very brief, truncated version of what's called the Enuma Elish. And so we can go back to those clay tablets. This is the Enuma Elish, is the name of this story. It's actually in the language of Akkadian, which is the language that the Babylonians spoke, thousands of years ago. Akkadian is actually a sister or a distant relative of the Hebrew language. And so in the area of Mesopotamia, they would speak this language, and that's the story that was discovered in 1847. In 1847, there was a library that was discovered that was dated to about the 7th century BC, so about the 600s BC, so 600 and some odd years before Jesus. There was a king of Babylon, or rather of Nineveh, of Assyria, the capital city of Assyria. There was a king who had a library, and for centuries and centuries it was left untouched. And then in 1847 it was discovered. That's, to me, it's like the Dead Sea Scrolls being discovered. It's like a window back into time to see what they would have. That's like somebody 3,000 years from now, going to Wikipedia and finding out what we believe in, right? Or finding out the stories that we would tell. And so they found 10 clay tablets with this story on it. Isn't that amazing? They have a story. The ancient Babylonians had a story about how the universe came to be, and it included all of these characters. What was it again? I want to get it right. Apsu, Tiamat, and Marduk, right? These are some of the main characters of that story. And so that is how the ancient Babylonians understood how the universe came to be. This is the story that they would tell, at least, about how the universe came to be. And it involved their gods, Marduk being one of their primary gods, right? Now here's the interesting thing. When the people of Israel were captured, and the people of Judah in particular were captured by the Babylonians, when the first temple was destroyed, what happened? We learn in books like the book of Daniel that a bunch of Jewish people were brought to Babylon, right? And they were assimilated into Babylonian culture, or at least the Babylonians wanted to try to assimilate them into their culture. Here's the thing. The Jewish people were going through a national crisis at that moment, right? Here they are, God's people. They've been chosen by God. They have a covenant with God, a relationship with God. And suddenly, and they were able to worship God at the temple in Jerusalem. And then suddenly the Babylonians came, destroyed that temple, and took them captive to Babylon. Well, if you were one of those Jewish people who was taken to Babylon, you must have questioned whether God was on your side or not, right? You might have thought, well, where is God in all of this? We had our own land, we had our own temple, we had our own relationship with God, and now we've been taken away from all of that. And so some people there, while in Babylon, they learned of this story of the Enuma Elish and how these people, these gods fought each other, and through the fighting came order to the chaos. It's this strange, to our ears and to our sensibilities, it's quite a strange story to have these two water gods fighting each other, and then Marduk coming and killing Tiamat, and one of them going into a deep sleep. It's this weird story, right? But to an ancient Jewish person who was taken to Babylon, you probably would have heard that story. In fact, some of them may have gotten assimilated into that culture enough where they started to believe these things. Right? They took on the culture of the Babylonians. What were the Jewish people, the leadership, let's say, what were they to do about this problem of some of their people learning this foreign story about these foreign gods and how the universe came to be? Well, the best thing to do, and I think God inspired this, in fact, because we believe that the Bible is inspired, right? Well, I think the best thing that could have been done was to tell the story, that sort of story, but with God instead, right? And to show through this story that God is not only superior to these other gods, and in light of God, these other gods don't really even exist. That God is the only true God, that God is the only true creator. And so let's look at the story of the creation narrative with that sort of thing in mind, and we'll see if some of this makes sense. First part, of course, we know in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and empty, and darkness covered the deep waters, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. The first thing to note is that, I know we like to say in the beginning. That's such a poetic way to talk about, to open that line. But that word or that phrase in Hebrew can actually be translated as when God began to create. Not necessarily, so in other words, this is not necessarily saying this is the ultimate beginning of everything. It's more so saying when God began to create the heavens and the earth, this is what happened. And that helps us to make sense of, if this is truly the beginning and there was nothing before this, why was there an earth that was formless and empty and darkness covered all kinds of water? What is water doing there, right? I think an explanation for this is that this is an Israelite version of the story, similar to the Enuma Elish, a story of God, that is our God, the true God, and how he overcame the forces of chaos. In this case, not other gods, but the chaos of a formless and empty earth, and an earth that was covered with waters. Even within the language, the word translated here as deep waters in Hebrew is related to the Akkadian word Tiamat. It's the Hebrew word Tehom. They're related to one another. So there's even a sense that they're giving a wink or a nod to this Babylonian story and saying, this is God overcoming these Babylonian gods. So the chaos and disorder that is referenced here in the earth was formless and empty and darkness covered the deep waters, to an ancient Jewish person who maybe lived in Babylon or knew of Babylon culture, this is immediately bringing to mind, hey, I think this story is supposed to get us to think about how things were in the Babylonian story, how there was chaos and disorder in the world, and that the world was covered with water. And so what do we find? That the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. The Spirit of God is a reference to his breath, his presence, his wind, literally is what it means. The wind of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. So the waters were there, but God's presence was there to meet those waters and to deal with those waters, to overcome the chaos. And how did God overcome the chaos? I think we all know. What did he do? Spoke. He said, let there be light, right? That's the next section. Let there be light. And there was light. Now, there's something really profound about the Creator speaking order into chaos. Because in order to speak, you have to do what? Although some people use this without thinking, right? In order to speak, you have to think, generally speaking, right? And God is a God of intelligence. He is the originator, of course, of intelligence, of wisdom, of logic. And so I think it's profound that God spoke, that is, he put an ordered thought and vocalized it, and that was enough to bring at least a little bit of order to the chaos. And this, to me, I think is very, very profound in the sense that if we want to have any kind of order to the chaos of our lives, the chaos of our minds, we have to combat the chaos with order, with thought, with thinking things through. You know, and I'm preaching to myself just like as much as I am to any of you, that if there is going to be any kind of success in our lives to deal with, you know, the things in our lives that are chaos or not the way we like them, you have to plan. You know, shout out to the planners out there. That's how you actually get through the chaos and overcome the chaos, is by implementing the God-given intelligence and wisdom that he's given us. But God said, let there be light, and he separated the light from the darkness, and God called the light day and the darkness night, right? And the way that the narrative goes is that there are 7 days referenced here. This is the first day, and each day God does something different, right? So we can just go through this, and I'll provide, just some insights here. It says, God said, let there be a space between the waters to separate the waters of the heavens from the waters of the earth. And God called the space sky, and this marked the second day. This, again, is calling back to the Enuma Elish story, the Babylonian story, because the two gods, I keep on forgetting it, Apsu, it's such a weird name, Apsu and Tiamat were both water gods. They were made up of water. One was, in fact, I forgot to mention this, one was the god of salt water, and I think Apsu was the god of fresh water, and Tiamat was the god of salt water. And so there was these waters, and we're told that God put a space between the waters. He separated them, and that's what allowed the sky to come into being. And in the next section it says, let the waters beneath the sky flow together into one place so dry ground may appear. And then God said, let the land sprout with vegetation. And this marked the third day. And then the fourth day, the next section, let lights appear in the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them be signs to mark the seasons, days, and years. And this marked the fourth day. So God creates on the fourth day the sun, the moon, and the stars. Isn't that interesting? Let lights appear in the sky to separate day from night, and let them be signs to mark the seasons, the days, and the years. Any of you who understand the Big Bang Theory and evolution, there's no way that that the creation of, or the coming about of the sun and the stars coming after us a long time, that doesn't jive with the way scientists understand the way things came to be. So in other words, this is different. This is not like what I'm saying is some people try to take this story and make it compatible with the Big Bang Theory and evolution. I don't think that's possible. I think that this is not even having in mind anything to do with the actual origins of the universe. This is a wonderful story that is telling us and poking at the Babylonians, but to say that God is the true creator, right? Anyway, we'll continue on. The fifth day, then God said, let the waters swarm with fish and other life, and let the skies be filled with birds of every kind, marking the fifth day. And then we get to the sixth day, and look at this. God said, let the earth produce every sort of animal. The animals are created But then it says, let us make human beings in our image, to be like us. And so God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them, marking the sixth day. That's a famous verse because not only is this talking about how human beings were created in God's image, which is a profound revolutionary concept, because in the ancient world, if you were just a normal person, sorry, you weren't made in God's image. If you were just some guy, you were just, a peasant that should be used by the kings. The kings were the ones who were made in God's image, not just the everyday people. This is telling us, no, everyone is made in God's image. All human beings are equal, are on the same level. But not only that, look what it says. Let us make human beings in our image. Where does the plural pronouns come from? Where does that come from? Let us, I thought God was one person, right? Who is being referenced here? Well, nobody knows for sure, but this is a clue that this story is, using some of the known mythology of the day, like the Babylonian story, where there's all kinds of gods, right? From a biblical perspective, this is God and his angels, right? God and his heavenly court, right? God includes the angels and the heavenly court in his creative process, but then it goes right back to the singular, so God created human beings in his own image. So God is one person, but he included angels and the heavenly court to create human beings. And then after creating the pinnacle, we are the pinnacle of his creation, God is then able to say that everything was very good and that the creation was completed. So then look what it says in chapter 2. So the creation of the heavens and the earth and everything in them was completed. And on the seventh day, God had finished his work of creation, so he rested from all of his work. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because it was the day when he rested from all his work of creation. Obviously, we're flying through this because there's just so much to cover, but we could look at each one of these and develop it into its own sermon. God rested on the seventh day. To me, this is a gift from God that he inspired this story to be told in such a way where the creation takes place in 7 days, with 6 days of creation and 1 day of rest. That's a gift, to humanity and to the people of Israel, to say, here is what the work week should look like. Be like me, where I created for 6 days and then rested on the seventh day. Because the Jewish people get from this passage that the Sabbath day is a universal blessing. It's something that all people, and we might not keep the Sabbath in terms of keeping it on Saturday the way the Jewish people do and that sort of thing, but the principle of resting from your completed work, that's a wonderful gift that God has given us. In fact, the book of Hebrews talks about how that is actually picturing what Jesus has accomplished for us. That the work of salvation is completed in him. And we don't need to strive in order to gain God's love and favor, because in Jesus, it is finished. Amen? It's finished, and we can rest in his love. That doesn't mean we don't have responsibility, right? We still have to make good choices and obey him, but it means that we don't have to strive for his love. It's already completed. And so just to summarize all of this, the whole idea here of the book of Genesis, if somebody says to you, well, I don't believe in God, or I don't believe God is the creator because, have you ever read Genesis chapter 1? That's not how it happened. How it happened was the Big Bang and evolution. My opinion is this: they're not in conflict. One doesn't have to do with the other. Genesis chapter 1 is not literally telling us about the origin of the universe. That's something that we can discuss at another time. In fact, I think there are plenty of verses in the Psalms, for example, that talk about how God is the creator. There's verses in the New Testament that talk about God being the creator. God is our creator and is the creator of the universe. But how that happened is that wasn't the intention of the people who put together the book of Genesis, right? They were trying to deal with the struggles that had become before them by being exiled into Babylon and being assimilated into that culture. And so they wanted to establish that God is the true creator. And God doesn't need to wrestle or even fight with these monsters, these gods. He just needs to speak, and order will come to the chaos. Let's have the worship team come so we can sing How Great Thou Art. The point here is, as we look at these great stories in the Old Testament and the Hebrew Scriptures, that we can find, we don't have to deny what people have devoted their whole lives to figuring out. We can actually say God is the creator. We don't have to argue about how that happened or how it came to be, but we can say it is a gift from God to be able to be curious about these things, right? To me, it's a wonderful thing that we can praise God for who he is, for being the creator. In fact, I think it's actually a really good thing for people in our day to believe the scientific ideas like the Big Bang and then to attribute that to God. Because that is what I think God's people have always done. You take the stories and the things that people say that are on that cosmic level, and we say, okay, fine. Let's say that that's what happened, the Big Bang. That's what happened. God is the one who did it, right? Isn't that a good way to say our God is bigger than anything we've ever dreamed of before?